Hi, and welcome back to Transcontinental Overload. I'm Stephanie, your host, and I have just survived the Texas snowpocalypse. The big freeze, the big Texas freeze 2021. Oh my word, what a week. At first we just thought, okay, here comes another Arctic blast. We get those from time to time. They come down from Canada, and because there's no mountain range in between Canada and Texas, to stop the blast, it just comes rolling through. And yeah, we had insane temperature drops over the past few years, but nothing like this. And when the snow came, we couldn't believe it. We had snow back in January, and that was crazy, and everyone was excited. And this time there was so much more. So much that we ended up sledding and walking knee-deep in powder around our neighborhood. My dog was in absolute heaven. He was ecstatic. We could let him off the lead, and he was bouncing around like a maniac. And the sun came out. It was just absolutely stunning. And then the power went, and things were not that stunning anymore. So that was Monday night, and the temperatures were forecast to drop down to minus 14 degrees Celsius at night. That's 9 Fahrenheit. And then to not go above freezing during the day for the next few days. No power. Luckily, we have a gas stove, so we could heat water and food that we rescued from the freezer. But then on Wednesday, so third day without power, a pipe burst above the garage, and we had to turn the water off. Still no power, and now no water, and we couldn't go anywhere either because the roads were frozen. There was ice, snow everywhere, and we live on top of a hill, and we were stuck at home. The house had cooled down to 4 degrees Celsius, 39 Fahrenheit, and we were so cold. And then a lot of people around us got their power back and were posting on the neighborhood Facebook page, and our little corner here still didn't have power, and it was just so frustrating. And then by Friday we were just miserable. But at least then temperature went up, and then we went to take a shower at a friend's house, which was amazing after a few days of no water. And then Friday night, the power came back on, and we even got a plumber who came and put a temporary a cap on our pipe. So right now it's holding up, and it was insane. We were very lucky to have gas, and so we could at least create some heat from time to time, but I am really not keen to repeat that experience. And we were also lucky to have all the winter clothes because we love winter sports. So we had all the snow gear and we wore it all. And a lot of people in Austin just don't have that. And then on top of that, Austin has a huge homeless population. And it has increased dramatically over the last 12 months, which I've seen on my walks. We have tent cities, which are basically slums. And so my heart is absolutely breaking for those people. And when it was really cold at night and I was in my bed under 3 layers of, blankets, duvets, rescue blankets, I was just thinking how those poor people were faring. So there are a lot of efforts in place to establish more shelters, and I know that there are amazing volunteers doing what they can. And if you feel at all inclined to donate, I have provided a few links in the show notes. I know every single penny counts. Another huge problem we have at the moment is a shortage of water, drinking water, but water in general. So we've been told not to do laundry or run a dishwasher, and we have to boil our water. So if you want to donate, there are plenty of places that could do with help. But enough about me and enough about winter storms. One of the things I hated the most last week was that I couldn't work on my podcast. I was in the middle of editing this episode, which I've enjoyed so much, and I really wanted to finish and share with you. But, well, here it is. My guest today is Katherine, who describes herself as an adult third culture kid and a serial expat of 15 years. Last year, she took a risk and moved back to her passport country, Estonia, to try and put down some roots, leaving behind a comfortable life in Denmark. Katherine's blog, Bad Days Abroad, is the very honest account of her expat experience. Here she talks about the challenges and realities of an international lifestyle and what effect it has on one's sense of self, relationships and family life. So that's exactly what we talked about. I was really blown away by Katherine's maturity and her ability to be absolutely honest with herself. So let's hear her story. Welcome, Katherine. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
I have to say your blog, Bad Days Abroad, it just caught my attention, mainly because I have got a lot of criticism, or not a lot of criticism, but some criticism on the name for my blog, my website, Transcontinental Overload, where some people have said, well, that sounds a little bit heavy and kind of negative. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, you know what? It's just the truth. And so when I read Bad Days Abroad, I was like, okay, that's really that's another step up. So I kind of felt a connection there straight away. Mm-hmm. How did you come up with the title?
Well, actually I did quite a bit of homework. I remember it was at least a few weeks of pondering over what I should call it. I thought about going safe or just calling it something generic, but knowing me, where I don't always have a filter, or I like to just call it as it is, I was just, you know what, this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the dark side of things. Mm-hmm. And so why would I call it something fluffy? Why not just call it as it is? Those bad days abroad, they exist.
I love that.
Yeah.
So before we talk about your blog, let's introduce you properly and maybe let you do that yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from and where you live.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, it is a bit of a colorful story.
Which is also why you're here.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So my name's Katherine, and my passport is from Estonia, but I was born in Russia, and then I spent my formative years in Estonia, Finland, and Switzerland. And my family lives in UK, Switzerland, and distant relatives in Estonia. So as long as I've existed, I know that there's a world outside of my passport country, and I've been exposed to it from a very young age. And I guess that has always kind of made me curious about what else is there besides the country that I went to school in, which is Estonia. So as early as I could, I left Estonia to Switzerland. And then later on, my mom happened to find a partner there. So her boyfriend, I guess it's okay they're not married, so I don't know what to call them these days. So met her partner, so she's in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And I decided to travel more, go backpacking, Australia, New Zealand. And then I landed in Denmark to study, but then it was sort of an on and off relationship with me in Denmark, if I can call it that, because I was in London for a little while there, and then Portugal as well. So yeah, it's been a colorful road. It's definitely put a lot of challenges on my way as well, but I think a lot of those have also been because of my willingness to take risks and just sort of throw myself in the deep end, rather than like do my homework about where I'm going, how I'm gonna make it, all those things. So now that I'm in my 30s, I'm definitely a lot more cautious about making a move anywhere. Also, the decision to move back to Estonia was something that I thought long and hard about and didn't talk about for a very long time with anyone, really.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm glad I did the homework with this one, because this was the right thing to do for the right reasons, and it's proven itself to be the right thing as well.
Mm-hmm. I guess, I mean, sometimes I think a lot of these decisions that, as someone who likes to live in other countries or learn other languages and all that, some of the decisions, you don't overthink it so much when you're younger. You just
Hmm.
kind of jump in, and it's life's an adventure. And especially if you have been exposed to a lot of different cultures from an early age, I think it's just a given that you embrace that. But sometimes I catch myself now overthinking things and just being too worried and doing too much research. And then it's like I'm kind of glad that I did a lot of the things I have done when I was younger, because I'd never do that now. And so
Yeah.
that must be similar.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's of course strange to admit now that I'm, kind of um, suburban, if you will, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm actually happy to be that. I was just talking about that with a colleague of mine the other day, who's also traveled a lot and then
Mhm.
decided to return to Estonia a few years ago. And a lot of the experiences that we're having now, even though she's been here a few years, are quite the same. And one of those things is that we've kind of done with traveling in a way, like this desire to, this
Mhm.
burning feeling to be somewhere else, that some people like to count their flights, and we're just like, mm, sure,
Been there, done that though. But also
yeah,
the suburban thing, I think it's just something that happens, and you do have to change the pace of your life from time to time. And I think if you say, I kind of started out more suburban and then went to the city. So, but even now I'm not in Austin is not a massive city. It's not like New York or Berlin
yeah,
or anything like that. So, but yeah, it's kind of nice to change it up from time to time. But that sense of being in a more kind of a slower paced
yeah,
environment, I think, is just something that happens.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
you need that, and you crave it. And we'll get to your repatriation and what that's been like. But so you said you did a lot of backpacking. So some of these places you didn't spend that much time in.
Well, it depends. I was in Australia for a year, and
Hmm.
then for half a year. um was that it? I think so. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if that's too little or too long. I certainly felt in some places, I felt a year in Australia was too long, and the half a year in New Zealand was too short.
Hmm. What were you
Like,
doing when you were there in terms of
well,
work?
because I've always been good at languages, I could just work in hotels, compared to lots of other people that came to Australia and New Zealand who weren't that great at English, so they ended up working in farms, for instance.
Hmm.
So I have no experience with that, but that's typically this, what was it, the working holiday visa? That's typically the experience that you get there. I
Hmm.
cannot relate because I never ended up doing that. But that allowed me to really see everything, and because when you work in hospitality, you typically get free trips as well, or tours.
Yeah.
So I got to do a lot of things that otherwise would have been very expensive
Hmm.
to
Oh,
do.
that's fun. Where were you in Australia?
Everywhere, really. I
Oh,
did the
that's
whole
amazing.
circle in the middle,
Yeah.
and Tasmania, the little tropical islands there. So I really got to see it all. Beautiful nature, absolutely stunning. But I just felt like it was not for me,
Hmm.
for me.
Yeah, but that's also the nice thing when you're young and free, and you can go visit, and there's no commitment, and there's no, no one person or family ties or anything like that. So that's kind of nice to experience that, because I mean, honestly, those you never know what a place is like, and you can do all the research in the world, and you go and then you're like, nah. And I've said this before on a podcast episode as well. There are some places that you just click with.
Yeah.
You can't even put your finger on what exactly it is, but it's just that sense of, yeah, this is really me. I can be here. And other places where people have raved about and said, wow, this is the most amazing city ever. And you go and you're like, it's just not me.
Yeah.
And I find that so interesting.
Indeed, and I think it can really take you by surprise.
Yeah.
I remember having these ideas, like these fixed ideas that, oh, I would really like Iceland. I went there and I hated it the minute I landed, and yet I have this amazing connection with Switzerland and Portugal,
Hmm.
and both of those countries are difficult places to live in as an expat. So I've
Hmm.
never actually, done it or considered doing it for real because it will be hard, at least based on the values or the needs that I have, right?
Yeah.
But the minute I'm there, I'm just like, oh, just land somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And how would I have known those things without ending up there in one way or the other, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How long were you in Portugal?
Well, in Portugal, I lived there for 3 months, like
Mm-hmm.
beginning to end. But I was with a Portuguese man for many years,
Mm-hmm.
so I was closely tied with the country.
And yeah,
Uh,
exposed to the culture in different
yeah,
ways. Yeah. And then you mentioned that you moved to Denmark to study.
that's right.
So what prompted that decision?
Coincidence.
And what did you study?
What did I study? Also a colorful story. Well, actually, so I had this fixed idea that I would be going to Iceland to study, and then I had a stopover in Denmark when I went to Iceland, and I was staying with a friend of mine who had just started a university there. And I just asked her about how the experience was, what the student life was like, and it kind of got stuck at the back of my head. And then I went to
Mhm.
Iceland, realized this is definitely not for me. Then I went backpacking, and all the while I just had Denmark in my head. Like I knew nothing about the country. I'd never heard the language before. Like this is the amount of homework I did, like zero basically. But I really liked the way that their education system was built, which was that it kind of encourages you to become an independent thinker, lots of group work, lots of problem solving. And my Estonian educational background was more that you just memorize things, and then that's considered
It's
education.
the traditional kind of
Yeah.
academic thing. That's interesting. I just spoke with someone who's French and lives in Denmark, and she said the same thing because her kids go to all these different schools
Mhm.
because of the different needs. And she was saying that the Danish system is so different to the French.
Yeah.
And I guess the French system sounds more similar to the Estonian system.
So I was really drawn to that way of learning, because I am very curious all
Hmm.
the time, and I love to learn new things and have my world opened up in different ways. So I was drawn to that,
Hmm.
and that was the main reason that held me in Denmark. So to go through university system, and I ended up becoming a real nerd because I got a doctorate in the end. But after that, I was like, no, I'm done. No, that's it. No more.
But I guess if you feel passionate about what you're doing and you like the way it's taught, then yeah, why not do that? So what was your subject or your subjects?
I was interested in communication in the start,
Hmm.
and then for my master's, I switched to cultural studies. So, and I really, really loved that because it kind of helped me look at the world from a more critical standpoint.
Hmm.
And then from there, I'd caught the attention of some teachers of mine who became my mentors, and then who helped me kind of understand that I could possibly do a doctorate in a field that was very interesting and relevant for me personally, professionally,
Yeah.
and also for not I wouldn't say the world, but applicable anyway. Something that's real and tangible. And that was interdisciplinary, but it mainly dealt with the transience of life at work.
Mhm.
So if you end up working with people you've never worked with before, you've got a project deadline. How do you make sense of each other when you come from all over the place? You have different ideas about how things should work,
Mhm.
but you got to get the work done. So how does that work? How does that happen? And this isn't just a one-time occurrence. This is something you constantly experience in your work life, this having to readjust and readapt to new constellations of people.
Mhm.
So that's something that I studied. So, and I really enjoyed it because transience as such, or like the how much life changes around us when we're expats, was so close to my heart as well.
Of
So
course.
in a
And
way,
yeah, so you've experienced that in your own life. And then, yeah, makes total sense. Because
yeah.
and the work thing too, the transience of work relationships is definitely with people who are all from the same country happens too, and the different characters
Mhm.
and this is where strengths and weaknesses and all that come
Okay.
together. But add into that different cultural backgrounds and different education systems, then yeah,
It's a
fascinating.
mix,
Hmm.
definitely. It's a huge mix.
And then you decided that you liked it in Denmark and
Well, it isn't that easy. If I said I decided I liked it in Denmark, it would be me lying. Oh boy. As I said, it was an on and off relationship with Denmark. I think every other year in the beginning, I was just ready to call it a day. And then it became every year. It was really a struggle to find my place in
Mhm.
Denmark. I don't think I ever did. In a way I did. I mean, I found like a way to function in that society, but with a lot of compromises.
Mm-hmm. What do you
Yeah.
think? Why do you think that was? Is it just culturally so different to what you had experienced before, or?
Well, actually, no. And that's the part that really surprised me. I mean, a lot of the societal values in Denmark, so social welfare, the education system, the way they have this strong sense of community, all of those are things that I believe in as well. But what I could not kind of reconcile was the fact that all of those things were, you were only welcome in that system if you were born in it
Mm-hmm.
or born into it. The minute you're an outsider, you cannot really participate in that. And that was something that really went hard against my values, because I've always been very open-minded and interested in having all sorts of people in my life. So that was something that was constantly clashing for me on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
I could have all these other things in common with everyone around me, but that one thing about me being a stranger was something that was just like rubbing me the wrong way every day. And some days I could deal with it better, other days less so. But yeah, it's being a foreigner in Denmark is definitely a special experience, I would say. Not unique to Denmark, I would say. I think others
Mm-hmm.
can relate to that experience, but yeah, it was isolating in many ways.
Yeah. I've had this before too, and it's just so interesting because you don't necessarily think about those things when you are, and let's put it, I want to say when you're a white middle class person, you don't expect that, right? We have that privilege of not having to worry about a lot of the things that other non-white immigrants and expats have to worry about.
Yeah.
It's something I'm ashamed to say I never really thought about that much, and about how much of a privilege that is, and
Hmm.
white privilege, and the ignorance that comes with it.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've thought about this more and more and realized that sometimes we can be really blind to those things, and you don't necessarily know what to
Hmm.
expect when you move somewhere. But
Hmm.
yeah, so that's interesting to hear, because I mean, just from this, I don't want this to sound weird, but I mean, you're blonde, Central European looking. You don't look like you'd stand out in Denmark at all in terms of that. But what made you feel that they were treating you like an outsider?
Hmm. And I think those are some very important places that you're going there. One of the things that did shock me when I was younger, I mean, I felt my whiteness before,
Hmm.
which was mainly in Asia. So I knew that skin matters, the skin color matters.
Yeah.
What I did not expect was having um, the way or whatever my heritage is matter in a white society as well. And so you're pointing out, you're asking a very good question. So what is that moment then? Because I
Hmm.
do pass, and I did pass, and people were
Yeah.
always shocked that, oh, you're not Danish. The moment that they realized that I'm not Danish is when I spoke,
Hmm.
because Danish is a phonetically very difficult language, and you're always going to have an accent. And even if it's a tiny one, it marks you as a foreigner. And that's enough for people to kind of take a different stance.
That's so interesting too, because I feel you always have an accent, and if it's not the language that you spoke from a very early age, and maybe if if you're complete bilingual, trilingual, and you but there is always an accent in
Mhm.
any language. They'll know instantly that you're not from the place.
Yeah,
But the attitude doesn't necessarily mean that
yeah.
they're hostile, or that there's oh, really, you're from somewhere else.
Mhm.
That's, I mean, different in each country and from region to region as well. So it's just
Mhm.
interesting that you're pointing out that it was kind of a very clear
Mhm.
boundary that they were putting up.
Mhm. But you're also right. It doesn't, that sort of moment doesn't necessarily warrant the interpretation that,
Mm.
oh, I'm being treated differently now. And I also experienced that in other places where, I mean, I speak a few languages, and I get by in German, I get by in Portuguese. I also get by in Estonian. But people in some places may acknowledge it, and then they just like, oh, whatever.
Hmm.
They don't even, dwell on that fact. And in other places, they do. And it's very, very different from who you're speaking to as well. It's not just country specific. And also, but it is also, it can also be country specific if you look at the history of how homogenous that society has been historically.
Yeah.
And Denmark has been very homogenous historically.
So you decided to leave Denmark and return to Estonia. And how long had you not lived in Estonia?
About 15 years.
Yeah. Wow. That's
So all of my youth, basically. Yeah.
And so yeah, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what how you decided to go back to your passport country after all that time living in other places.
I think it was a strange journey looking back, because I think the first time that maybe my subconscious acknowledged that there is a yearning or a draw, something drawing me back or drawing to the Estonia that it is now. A few years ago, when I met someone a fellow Estonian who had also returned to Estonia and had lived in Denmark for a very long time. And she described this very specific moment that has a lot of cultural meaning to most Estonians. It's this song festival that takes place every 4 years, and it's a very nationalistic event. And she always participates with the choir there. And she remembers not being able to participate and just seeing it from the TV and then just crying about it. And, if you listen to that story, you're like, wow, okay, you're just being emotional. But there was something about that story that really stuck with me on some level. And then I just went about my life. But then I think it was only maybe 2 or 3 times that I went to Estonia after that time. And every time I came back to Denmark, it was really hard. And I'd never experienced that before. Like, I'd never been one of those people that was homesick, that had a hard time returning from one of my summer vacations in Estonia. I always just went about my life, and that was that. But it began to be hard for some reason, and I was so unaccustomed to those feelings. I didn't know what they meant. Like, should I be taking them seriously? Is it just vacation blues? What is this?
And were you, when you would go, would you stay with family and friends, and were they a big part of that push, or do you think it was just that?
No, maybe partly. I mean, most of the time I would be driving around Estonia. It's a small country, and my distant relatives are all over the place. And I don't have any childhood memories with them, which is a story on its own. So it didn't feel like, oh, I'm going home. It felt more like one of those social obligation things that you do when you go.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that when they're an expat. So it's an intense time. So I don't think it was that, but maybe the things that maybe stuck with me is that these little cultural references, like there's a lot of things that I do not know anymore, but some things I do know, like these very old classical songs or some cultural situations, not situations, events that happened when I did live in Estonia that, I recognized, and you don't have to really have a long conversation about it because you both know what it's about. And that's something you don't have with other expats. It's a history that you have to create from scratch. And I guess those little moments just kind of started pulling at my heartstrings on some level. And it was just hard to meet these new people in my everyday life in Denmark and just not have that shared history with them. And that's just started kind of bugging me more and more and more. And then it kind of escalated when I think it was, what year are we in now? I think it was a year and a half ago. So about less than a year before I decided to move to Estonia, about 90% of my friends in Denmark left all at once in the same month.
Wow.
And it was rough. It was really rough. Like, I'd had friends leave before, and they're still my friends to this day. And of course, it's sad for a while, but to have 90% of them leave, as well as seeing that my doctorate was about to end because I was finished with it, like seeing that all these things that have kept you there are coming to an end, it kind of feels like a cliff. Where you're like, okay,
You
what
have
am
to
I
make
gonna
a decision.
Yeah. So I think kind of life was pushing me that way, well, the circumstances around me,
Yeah.
plus that little process that had been brewing for a few years already. And you know, when I got quiet and asked myself, like, what do I see myself doing? It was like, well, for one, leave Denmark, because I've been wanting to do that for a while. But then the question was, where do I go?
Yeah.
And
So
this
you could
little,
have gone to Switzerland, I guess, and be with your mom.
well, no, not really, because it's difficult to go to Switzerland if you don't have a job already, and it's not EU, right? And I'm
Oh,
one
yeah,
of
of
my
course.
conditions has always been, don't go to
Yeah.
a country where you have a lot of visa problems.
Yeah.
So, you know, Switzerland unfortunately was out of the question. I was considering Portugal, I was considering Netherlands, maybe even Germany, because I already spoke the language, even Austria. But there was this little voice in me saying, no, I think it's time to try out Estonia in the way that
Hmm.
it is in year 2020,
Hmm.
because it changed a lot, like a
Yeah.
lot. And
That's, I would guess, moving back to a country after all that time, it's 15 years, you change a
Mhm,
lot, and the place will not be the same
mhm,
that it was when you left it. And 15
exactly.
years, and the last 15 years, oh my goodness. I mean, if you just look at the news and history, like recent history, so much has changed. So I can imagine it's like moving to a brand new country.
It is. And that's exactly what the experience has been like. So when people ask me, oh, you must be so happy to be home again, or what's it like living in your home country again? I'm like, for one, it's not home.
Hmm.
Second of all, I don't know this country. Like, there are
Yeah.
some things that I'm, you know, familiar with.
Yeah.
Obviously, I speak the language to a degree, but I've never lived here as an adult. I've never functioned in the system that exists here today. I don't know this place to that degree,
Hmm.
so it's not a familiar place at all.
So what did you, when you said that was the one place or the one time that you did your research,
Yeah.
what did that entail? So you made the decision, and what did you do to prepare? Did you read up about culture shock, reverse culture shock, and all those kind of things?
Actually, yeah, no. So funny that you mentioned that, because I didn't prepare myself emotionally at all, like in terms of reading. I knew that this was probably going to be a rough ride. I've had other friends, Estonian, that have returned home. I have other friends who returned to their home
Hmm.
countries, and then they decided to leave after a few years. So I kind of knew different ways that this can go,
Yeah.
but I didn't feel any need to read up on that. But what I did do, I kind of, for the first time, perhaps looked at, like, where do I want to be in the next several years? What kind of life do I want to give my hypothetical kids? Do I want them to be expat kids or
Hmm.
third culture kids? Well, where do I see myself? Like, where do I want to live? Like, in a house or in an apartment, or what kind of nature do I want to have around me? What do I need at all? So it really started out with this very long process of asking myself, who am I now, and what kind of needs do I have now? You know, it's a process of exploration, and you can really be surprised when you're open-minded about what is it that you really need and not what society tells you that you need. And it was based on that. Then I you know, looked at these different countries that I had in my mind and did a literal pros and cons list. Like, do I get my core needs met in this country? And if there were questions about, well, would this be possible there or not, then I would talk to someone that has
Hmm.
long-term experience in that space or in that country. And to my surprise, well, it was either Denmark or Estonia
Hmm.
that fit the bill. And since I already knew Denmark, I was like, well, this is Estonia's
Yeah.
time then. Yeah.
Wow. But that process of actually really sitting down with yourself and thinking about all those things, what's important to me and what, my needs, my basic needs, that's quite a big step. And I think not a lot of people do that, especially
No.
before moving. And I mean, sometimes, you move and the decision is made for you by other
Yeah.
factors. So that's really a big one. And how's that been so far?
It's really, honestly, I hate saying it because I know that not everyone has such an easy time, but it's been really nice. Um, I really think that because I thought through what it is that I'm
Mhm.
looking for here, and I knew that I would find it here, makes it easier to tolerate those things that I gave up by moving here.
Yeah.
Because they exist, they absolutely do exist, but they don't rile me up as much because I knew why I chose this
Mm-hmm.
place. And I still feel alienated from the society because I've had such a different, life experience
Yeah.
for years. There are so many references I do not get at all. My Estonian is not that great for an adult that has a doctorate. There are many moments where I just feel like a complete idiot and like, oh, this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is an absolute privilege to have had the time to really sit down and think through what
Yeah.
do I need, where can I have those needs met. A lot of expats end up being expats through job or some sudden opportunity, and you don't have the time then
Mm-hmm.
to really self-reflect on those
Mm-hmm.
things. So in that sense, I think I'm a not the rule, but rather an exception.
Yeah. Well, it also it's still early days, and the pandemic is still going on. So that's, I think anyone moving during this time is, I mean, there's so many added difficulties and obstacles getting to know a place. But I guess in some ways also it narrows things down so much that you have to think and face a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise.
Mhm.
Which kind of brings me to your website, because you just recently added, or well, recently over the last year, obviously, the special series on expats in lockdown on your website, where you talk to people, interview people
Mhm.
um, who are, some of them stuck in a country that's not their home country, or that wasn't the plan. So you have an American in the Netherlands and a Brit in Mexico, and all these different stories. And I read a few
Mhm.
of them, and it's just, I just loved that you were doing that. Was that just something you felt like, I've just moved, so I want to talk to other people who've moved during this time?
Well, actually, this was before I moved. I
Yeah.
so they were all long before I moved. No, not long before, but I think I finished the whole series about a month before. Not quite
Hmm.
sure on the timing, but no, it was all while I was sitting in lockdown in Denmark myself, and self-reflecting,
Hmm.
and it really helped me to talk with all these wonderful people that wanted to share their stories with me, because they were so wonderfully honest and open with me,
Hmm.
and then it just kind of felt like, wow, people really, this time really pushes us to kind of look within.
Yes,
um
it's exactly that. There's so many added obstacles, but it also has that benefit of
yeah.
self-reflection, if you want.
Hmm.
And that really comes across in those interviews too. So I really like
That's
that.
good. And I hope it encouraged, or at least um, kind of made like a safe environment in their own little bubble to also do that by themselves, because not everyone's used to looking within, and maybe even scared to do that because it's
Hmm.
painful, or there's a lot of, it's a Pandora's box if you start somewhere.
Oh
And
yeah.
I completely understand that. So I hope that kind of created a little bit of a safe space to get through those that really weird time. Not that it's not weird now, but it was a shock to everyone around the world at the time.
Yeah, and because we couldn't really plan for anything, and I think a lot of people might have changed their plans or would have done things differently had they known.
Hmm.
Again, reading other people's stories I think is so helpful to so many people,
Hmm.
just because it makes it human. It's not like you're reading a self-help manual that
Hmm.
tells you what to do, but other people's stories always kind of, it resonates more. So I really like that, and I'm going to put a link to your blog and that series too, and in the show notes, because it's just really, really interesting to see what people come up with when they look deep inside themselves. So I really
Hmm.
like that.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit more about your website. So when did you start Bad Days Abroad?
Well, let me think. I think that was October 2019. So not that long ago, actually.
Hmm.
And considering that I took an unintended break from June last year until now, I really didn't blog for all that long. But now I'm back at it, found my kind of mojo again and
Hmm.
my purpose again, given that I've, given myself time to change and kind of adapt and,
Yeah.
fall into place, because repatriation has also kind of made me look at things differently. And I haven't quite been able to articulate all of those thoughts yet.
Yeah.
But all I knew was that things need to shift. Something needs to change here,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm quite excited to explore this new direction now.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting, isn't it, when you write about things? Because sometimes it feels easy to write in the moment, and you
Mhm.
kind of process things by writing about them. But other subjects and other areas in your life you need to reflect first and live it and kind of let it stew for a bit before you can even attempt to articulate it and your feelings and emotions and everything. So, and that's the interesting thing about a blog, I guess, because you feel like you want to be adding to it on a constant basis, but it's really hard to find the format to do that in. and
Mhm.
and then sometimes you have phases where it's just nothing, and
Yeah.
then you have to find a way to connect with people. So
Mhm.
yeah, talking to other people, it always helps.
Yeah.
I find it's like when I get to that point where I'm too much in my head, and
Yeah.
I think I just need to, I need to do something else, because otherwise I'm going crazy with self-reflection.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. When you do have this tendency, or I don't know if it's a tendency, but when you are a reflective, self-reflective person, you need to get out of your own head and talk to other people. It helps a lot and inspires a lot as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, and it's great too. And I found writing is a really good way of processing things too. And then you look back onto what you've written
Hmm.
and you think, wow,
Yeah.
how your view changes on things. And it's great. It's great. It's people journal for that very reason. Your website is there's so many angles to it and so many topics. One that really stood out to me was the topic of language. And we've already covered a lot of that. I mean, you were saying that your Estonian isn't quite what it should be for someone with a PhD, and also how much your
Mhm.
accent was making you stand out. So that's obviously a big subject. And when I saw on your website that you write an article about debunking myths about
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
And the three biggest myths are: one is you can learn a language in 1 year.
Hmm.
B, it's easier to find a job if you speak the local language. And three, it's easier to make friends. So you're
Hmm.
saying these are all myths that are simply not true. Did you
Hmm.
want to talk about that?
Sure. So the first one was you can learn a language in a year. I mean, sure, you can. It depends on the language as well. It depends on your own language background. It depends on your own ability to learn languages. Some people are better at math or numbers. I'm not. I'm great at words and languages. So that's always going to come easy for me. But for others, it may not. And even so, like the kind of fluency that you can expect in a year. I mean, I've done this whole full immersion thing once in my life, and you do become quite comfortable speaking in that
Mhm,
language, but it's not enough for sounding really articulate at
mhm,
work. It's you learn certain scenarios to survive and maybe express emotions a little bit,
mhm,
but it's not, you know, your language learning is not done after a year. It's a process that takes forever, maybe
mhm.
depending on you, really.
Yeah, but I think in any language. I mean, I've been living in English speaking countries for over 20 years now, and I still learn something new almost every day in the
Exactly.
language. But also about German. I read things in the newspaper and I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that word." So it is definitely an ongoing process.
Mm,
So your second point was it's easier to find a job if you speak the
yeah.
language.
Again, yeah, going back to the same fact, like you're not going to be fluent enough to sound really articulate at work
Hmm.
in the first 3 months, 6 months, a year. Maybe there are some exceptions in certain jobs where it's not word based, sure. But I suspect that most expats are looking for office jobs where it's very word based.
Yeah.
And to get to that level of fluency takes a lot of either immersion nonstop, like you have to be at work all the time, or many years. And so many expats have experienced the same thing. They put so much effort into learning a language and it's not enough. And then they're disappointed and they're sad and they're frustrated. Like, I've done all this work. Why is it not
Hmm.
working? Why is no one appreciating it? Of course, but the odds were always going to be against you. And if if you end up in an unfortunate society where accents are not tolerated either, it's even harder. So this is something that I saw in Denmark a lot, that people, because the language education is free, people throw themselves into it. I did that as well. So I'm speaking from my own bitter experience, that you just throw yourself in the language. I'm good at languages, so I learned it. And then I expected the doors to, burst open for me. It never happened. It didn't happen because it was not, the game didn't, that's not how the game went. There were other ways that I had to prove myself in order to get my way into the whole workplace system, the labor market. So I think this, of course, you should learn the language to, if you want to show respect and understand a bit more, but it's not to everything. Not for a long while, anyway.
So would you say it's maybe just more honest to just learn the basics and not expect so much of yourself and your environment?
I would say so. Yeah.
And I guess that goes for the third myth, where you say that it's not true that it's easier to make friends when you speak the local language.
And I think there are very big differences now on depending on where you are. Because I've had a much easier time in Latin cultures, for instance, or Southern Europe, for instance, English speaking as well. But then, language, being able to express those words in a different language gets you so far. But then there's the whole social side of things, the cultural context side of things, the references that indicate that you really belong and you get it and you fit into this group. And those are not things you learn in a language school, and just knowing the language doesn't give you that. And I think that kind of trips people up as well, that if you don't happen to be in a, let's say you go to university with the same people, and alongside that you learn the language, and then you kind of grow up together, like through the university, that then you have this shared history built together. And then it makes sense that, of course, you use that language and that's your lingua franca, so to speak. But if you just move to a country and then you start learning the language, people don't care that you learned their language. They don't think you're going to be a great friend because you've learned the language now. Like, no.
And I guess it's where you at that level where you can express yourself, but you can't show your true colors, if you want, in the other language, because that's such a big thing, isn't it? Where you feel, as someone who's learning a foreign language, you never, like, people don't know me really. They don't know how funny I can be or how intelligent I can be, because I just don't have the ability to express myself. And that's that really innate desire, I think, to be that, for people to know who your truest self. Another big subject on your website is friendship, and that's a topic that's very close to my heart. Friendships and all the issues that come with that, whether it's the stereotypes, expats being transient. So that's a big one, I think, in the whole expat community. That how do you deal with transient friendships, and how does that affect your ability to make friends when, and you mentioned this earlier where you said 90% of your friends left within a few months. And I mean, that's something that hits us as expats very hard, and it happens a lot. How do you deal with that? And one of the statements I've seen on the website is expat friends are the easiest to find and make, but they're sometimes the hardest to keep. So obviously it's like you move, you don't really necessarily think about different types of friendship. I think when you move, you just want to find people, like-minded people. But how do you think being an expat affects that process?
Finding friends or finding like-minded people. Well, I think what it definitely does, just by way of numbers, is that your options are smaller. The kind of people, the amount of people that you're able to meet is a lot smaller. If there's a language barrier involved, you only have expats to rely on, right? And depending on where you moved, we may be talking about thousands of them, or maybe 20 of them, maybe a million if you're in a big city or bigger city. So yeah, I think that's one thing that makes it difficult to find like-minded people. The other thing is that, I think in life we're not really taught to go out and find friends as an adult. Like when you go to school or you go to university, it kind of happens because you're there, you're always seeing each other, and you naturally just bond. But the minute you're out of the education system, when you're at workplace, people have their own struggles, their own concerns, their own families and career hopes, whatever it is that takes most of their attention. And so then when you're an expat and you're an adult and you go somewhere to work, suddenly you have to figure out how to make friends in such a context or under such circumstances. And it's like learning to walk in a way. You're not networking, you're actually trying to emotionally connect with someone in order to be there for each other for however long. I mean, no one gives you courses on that, no one at all. And then, if your options are limited, or like the amount of people that you can meet, then you just kind of end up being friends with people that you may not necessarily be friends with otherwise.
And that happens, I think, a lot in the expat community, where and I've found this, where people have said, oh, so and so is German, you need to meet her, and then you kind of, yeah, it's we have that in common, but I don't think we and that happens. I think that happens a lot. And yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, but sometimes it's surprising how you find people that you click with, and as you get older. And in my experience, it's not necessarily to do with the fact that you are the outsider or an expat or anything like that. And I think there's always this people, depending on obviously where you move, what country you're in, and because people will always say this about Germans, and it comes up again and again how difficult it is to make friends with Germans and
Uh-huh.
English people as
Yeah.
well. And it's really interesting because people have that assumption, I think, even before they go, that they're closed off and they have their old existing friendships and they don't necessarily want to accept outsiders. And by the sounds of it, the Danes are maybe a little bit similar.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I said this before. I've found this not necessarily to be true, because it's stereotypes. Yeah, okay, but making friends is just difficult. Full
Mhm.
stop. It's just difficult in any scenario.
I would agree. And I mean, those comments or those stories that you mentioned before about it being easy to make friends with Americans.
Mhm,
Yeah, maybe, but what kinds of friendships are we talking about then?
mhm.
Are they the kinds that you
Yep.
want? Are they, if you want really deep and meaningful friendships, will you have that with Americans? Or, well, actually, let's scratch that. That sounds already incredibly generalizing.
And but it's so difficult when talking about this topic, because people have all these views on what people are like. And yeah, you hear that whole, oh, Americans are so shallow and you're never going to find a good. That's not true.
No, it's
It's
not. No,
it's
I hate
like,
that
yeah,
it.
it's I know. And I say, this comes up in the interviews as well. And I listen to it and I'm like, yeah, we went way
Yeah.
down into that whole stereotype thing. And actually, yeah, okay, maybe on the surface that's what it appears to be, but that's what I kind of meant by it's just so individual. And
Mhm.
I think you might just be lucky. And
I think so. I do think so, because I mean, I've seen people thrive in Denmark, just find themselves at the
mhm,
right time with the right people,
yeah,
and they're on cloud nine, and it was meant to be like that for them.
yeah,
Like, there's no need for me to compare myself. I'm a completely different person. I have different needs,
mm,
and maybe for me, my people are somewhere else, and that turned out to be the case. Except they all left in the end, right? So that's my kind of journey. But we cannot. Yeah, I really hate the fact that I fell for that easy trap of saying, "Oh, Americans are all shallow." Like,
yeah,
it's no,
it's
I can do
yeah.
better.
And it's very easy to do. It's very easy to do when you're in also when your mindset is that is set like that. And maybe you've been there for a while and it really hasn't you haven't made any friends, and you think, why is that? And but honestly, I think it really comes down to you yourself and how you approach people and your expectations.
Mhm.
When you say that, so expat friends are the easiest to find and make because, well, we said sometimes we're thrown into the same. Someone says, "Hey, we are expats. Come and meet. Join the group."
Yeah.
But they're sometimes the hardest to keep. So,
Hmm.
do you think that's also because some of these friendships are not really? You wouldn't be friends in any other way, and then it naturally just dissolves as soon as you're not in the same environment anymore.
I think that's one scenario, but I think that applies to any kind of friendship, regardless of whether you're an expat or not. So that's one scenario. But expat friends are hard to keep because you never know how long they're going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're one of those expats that's in the country for many years, you'll have a long rotation of people coming and going. And
Mm-hmm.
so at some point, for instance, in my case in Denmark, I just watched them come, I let them into my life, and then gracefully tried to let them go again. And then you just have to really start thinking about friendships in a more philosophical way to
Mm-hmm.
be able to deal with that pattern
Yeah.
of people coming and going, because they have decided to move on for whatever reason, and I
Mm-hmm.
have decided to stay.
Yeah.
And so it's odd to be thinking in that way when you're in your 20s, but I really realized that people are transient
Mm-hmm.
in your life, and everything in life is transient, where you work and who you're with and the friends you have, or maybe
Yeah.
even your partners in life, that everything kind of comes and goes. And but the positive of that is that you appreciate those moments more, than kind of forces you to be in the moment and appreciate this moment with that person in this
Mm-hmm.
country with that.
Absolutely. That's my experience in all those years and trying to, obviously last year we didn't travel at all
Mhm,
to see people, but in previous years trying to make time for people and going back, say home to
mhm,
wherever that was and connecting with people. And it was always really interesting to see who made time and
mhm.
who had kind of already moved on and be
Yeah.
like, yeah. I found that really difficult at the beginning when we moved
Mhm,
to the States and going back and going, hey, I'm in town, let's meet up. And then they would be like, oh, I have a concert that night, or I have dinner plans. And I'd be like, but I'm only here today. And I really struggled. And it took me a long time to kind of let go of that and be like, yeah, that's that moment of the transience.
mhm.
I'm not in that kind of category anymore, and that's fine. That has to happen.
Yeah.
And then, but I've also found that other friendships that maybe even people that I hadn't seen that much or that often, but those friendships have deepened over the distance
Mhm.
just by making it, like you said, making more special or realizing, appreciating it for what it is and making that the priority, and then just having really good conversations
Mhm.
over FaceTime or on the phone or writing to each other, and all of a sudden that friendship that was maybe just because you've lived in the same area has now
Yeah.
become a really big part of my life, and that's really interesting.
It is.
And I think a lot of people probably have experienced that over the last year when you haven't been able to physically see people. You really know who's there for you and who's important in your life.
Yeah. Absolutely. It really is strange who ends up being sort of, or develops into being a very important person in your life, and who ends up not being that. And
Mhm.
it can be an emotional shock. And if you're not ready for that, and
Yeah.
if you don't know that this is something that's part of this lifestyle that you chose,
Yeah.
this adventure, so to
Mhm.
speak, then it can be a very bad shock for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And
it's important to talk about these things so that it doesn't come as a shock to people, that they can kind of, maybe they don't, it's not going to be important for someone for a while, but when it does, they will remember, oh, those people on that podcast were talking about that. That's
yeah.
what they were talking about.
That's so true. Yeah. And I think it's just difficult. So yeah, we meet a lot of expats, and just we have that in common, so it's easy to make friends. But those friends who are not in that category, those friends who have stayed where they grew up and they have never moved and all that, it's much harder sometimes you have to find your own way of how that friendship works, because they can't understand necessarily what you're going through at all. So that's something that that cannot come into the friendship in some ways because they just don't have that. That's not what you talk about with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are, to me, are really valuable friendships, because it's like that's a lot of, mutual understanding and just respect, I guess, to keep
Mm-hmm.
those friendships going with such
Mm-hmm.
different lifestyles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've tried to, over the years, kind of think of my different friends being that they're for different purposes. I have a childhood friend, for instance, who's never left the country. Like,
Mhm.
she only just discovered traveling for herself 3 years ago. That was for health reasons more than anything, but our lives could not have been different, but we've always had this soul connection, so we've always been close. But it's very odd being in the same country now with her, and I think we're still finding our way.
Yeah.
How is this now going to be between us? I realized that with her, I cannot talk about what I'm experiencing now, so there's no point. But
Mhm.
I have other friends who have experienced what I'm experiencing now, so I can turn to them for that. And I have other things in common with them as well, not just that one thing. But I'm kind of trying to, it sounds so brutal or technical, but I'm trying to categorize those
Yeah.
different people for different purposes so that I don't get disappointed
Yeah.
that they're not who they're not anyway. They are a friend for me for different reasons.
Mhm.
But it is, even as I'm explaining this, it sounds so odd, but it is a way for me to love them for what they bring into my life and who they are, without expecting them to be my everything.
Yeah.
And all of them to be
And
my
that's
everything.
exactly, that is so important. And that's why it's like, there's all these memes about the friends we appreciate that we don't see for 2 years or don't talk to, and then we see them and it's like we've never left. And it's that, but you have to learn that. You have to learn to appreciate that and not be resentful of them not making time or not being right there when you need them. And I think that's just a process that, I mean, everyone goes through, not just expats,
Mhm.
but for us it's that added element.
Mhm.
Now, looking back on all those countries that you've lived in, let's talk about all the things you loved about them and that you miss.
Mm.
Now that you're back in Estonia, and I mean, it's early days, so
Mhm. No, but there are moments when I do have like these feelings of longing for
Mhm.
being in a different place. But I don't think it's a specific thing. Like, just sometimes I'm just making tea and then I'm suddenly in my I really feel like I'm for momentarily transported to Lisbon. This one specific street where it smelled like this and the sun shone like that, and I'm there, and then I just want to be there. So I have moments like that a lot, and I think it's kind of brought on as well by the fact that I don't know when I'll be able to travel. No one knows, and so
Yeah,
longing gets worse because of. So it's stuff like that happens quite often, and they're fleeting moments, but they happen, and they do tell me that I've had a past and a history somewhere else that means a
yeah,
lot, right? So yeah, it's a bit like these grieving moments, I think.
yeah. That's exactly what it is. I think a psychologist would tell you that that's exactly what it is. And then it depends on what you do with the situation. And I kind of feel, because you mentioned tea and the smell, I think that's a really strong one. It's a
Mhm.
sensory
Mhm.
experience, and it just gets you to a moment in time. I have those moments. I have a candle that I bought, not because I love the smell, but purely because when I smelled it in the shop, I was instantly transported to this beach in California.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know, even, it's like, this is how it smelled. And my
Mhm.
brain, I knew that. And it wasn't even, it's like, I don't know what exactly it was, whether it was the sun cream or I have
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah.
And I just had to buy the candle because of that. And it's like, it's the same now when I pick it up and I take a sniff, and it's like, yep, that's that moment. But then it's, how do you deal with it? Do I then fall into the whole rabbit hole of, oh, I
Mhm.
wish I was there, or you know, or can I just say, oh, how nice that
Mhm.
I can be transported back to a place in time
Mhm.
and appreciate it and say that I'm so happy I had that moment there.
Mhm.
Um,
think those moments can hit quite differently because sometimes they really floor me. Like sometimes I really feel like, you know what, I need to stop whatever I'm doing and just really kind of have if we call it grieving, then really
Yeah.
have a moment to grieve. Like, shit, I miss that place. I don't
Yeah.
know when I'm going to see it. This sucks right now.
Hmm.
And then, you know, if you kind of give space to that feeling, it becomes less powerful.
Yeah.
It goes away, not necessarily faster, it can, but at least it's got the attention that it was demanding from you, right? And then we can be grateful for the fact that, you know, at least I experienced it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Yeah, and it really depends. Like, I don't know, there's no rhyme or reason to why
Hmm.
certain things remind me of something at the oddest hours of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. I know sometimes it just comes out of the blue. And
Yeah.
then it's depending on your mood of the day as well, and your kind of mental state, how you
Yeah.
deal with it. But is there anything that you do kind of on purpose that makes you feel connected to a place? Because, you know, whether it's a dish you cook or a tradition that you have that you just love, and you do it when you want to feel that pang of,
Mhm.
oh, I miss that place, I'm going to do this now. Is there anything that you do?
Yeah, it is cooking. I absolutely love food, and it's one of the biggest joys that I have when I travel. So the only way that you can tell when you meet me or get to know me that I've traveled so much or lived in so many different places is if you come over for dinner. That's the only place. Otherwise, I don't really talk about the fact that I've lived in so many different places. But yeah, it's food that really gets me to that happy place that, oh, this tastes exactly right, and this brings me to that place. But it's also a little bit bittersweet. I feel like, for instance, since COVID, I don't do that. Actually, I feel like
Yeah.
it's almost too triggering to have those memories come back of these happy days where you could go out and eat food
You
there.
have to know that you can handle it, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
spoke to someone and she said they were doing, and I know a lot of families have done this, they're doing these kind of cultural themed nights during COVID. And she said they did like an Indian night because I lived in India, and
yeah.
she put on a sari, and she just felt like she wanted to decorate and really celebrate that. And I thought that was beautiful.
Mhm.
But she had got to that point where she was able to say, I'm I love the fact that I lived in that place, and it's making my life richer, and I don't necessarily need to be there right now, but I can celebrate it. And I thought that was just amazing. And that sounded really fun. But yeah, you have to be ready to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is there anything that you really don't miss from any of the places that you like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that anymore?
Oh, people are gonna hate me for this, but not miss the Danish language. Especially the ones that are living in Denmark and have to learn it or want to learn it or determined to learn it. I'm so happy I don't have to hear the language again. You know, because I have
Yeah.
linguistics background, I've realized one of the things that's important for me is that I love the sound of the language that's around me. Even if
Yeah.
I'm not perfect at it, I need to love how it sounds. And
Mhm.
I never had that with Danish, unfortunately. So I'm glad that I have a language around me that I love, um, even if I'm not great at it, but at least my ears are not bleeding. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry to everyone who's listening to this and they're in Denmark.
Yeah, but you know that's you're not the only one who says
No.
that about the Danish language. And it's, I think, well, from what I hear, is one of the hardest, because it's maybe not so much from a grammatical point of view, but the understanding it and the pronunciation and all that. And
Phonetically messed up. It's really insane. It's really insane.
that's so interesting. I have a what I have a Dane on the list of people to interview, so I'm going to ask him all these questions about his own language. Well, it's not a language I've ever, well, I've never needed to learn, and or never wanted to learn either.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's interesting for us language enthusiasts, is that,
Mm.
you know, what makes you love a language, and that's a whole other subject.
It is.
Um, can you think of anything, like talking about language, maybe
Mhm.
um funny or embarrassing that happened to you along the way in terms of languages and saying the
Oh,
wrong thing?
yeah. So I can't remember the first years abroad. I'm sure there were many situations when I was learning German or
Hmm.
getting better at English or learning Danish, but I have those moments with Estonian a lot. One of those was with my uncle. I was trying to say to him, no one's judging you, but what I ended up saying was that no one values you.
Oh.
It's the same word, but you can use that word value in two meanings, well, with two meanings, but I ended up using it the wrong way. And so he looked at me like, what are you on about? And then from his reaction, I could tell that I said something wrong, and then we had to clarify the situation, and it was all good. But yeah, that was quite embarrassing, and I don't get embarrassed very easily.
Yeah. I imagine, yeah, but that's just going to change over the next few months. I guess you'll just get back into it and also learn all the new things about the language, because that's also the thing. I think when you leave your country and you spend a lot of time away from it, you don't necessarily pick up on all the new linguistic developments.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I experience every time I'm in Germany, I'm like, wow, we didn't used to say that.
Yeah. And it's funny, like that can happen even in like 5 years, 10 years. Languages are always evolving. So those who are saying like, oh, we need to keep the language pure, like there's no such thing.
No.
It's always changing.
No. Most languages are heavily influenced by English. I guess it's not only German, but there's so many anglicized things now. And it used to really annoy me. And some things still really annoy me, because I think, oh my God, there's such a beautiful German word for that. Why do you want to use the English? But at the same time, as you said, languages are constantly changing and evolving, and you have to kind of go with the flow. That's how society is shaping it. And sometimes it's hard for us linguists, I think, to accept. Before we say goodbye, where can people find you? Is it, so you have the website Bad Days Abroad. Are there any other channels that you can be found?
Well, I'm also on Instagram, Bad Days Abroad as well. And now I'm starting a new series, which is about the question, should I stay or should I go? Whether that's going back to your passport country, your home country, a country that you used to live in, or whether that's moving on to a new place. And it's a question that I, thought a lot about by myself, quietly, kind of stressing over it. And I've come to learn that a lot of people actually have that question, but it's not really talked about that much. So I'm going to be talking to a lot of different people who have a different relationship with that question, and how they've and then tell their story of how they've resolved that for them, whether that's they've decided to stay or move or whatever the situation then is around.
Eternal question for an expat, or maybe not necessarily just an expat, a global soul. It's so hard. The word expat is so limiting in some ways, and I kind of feel like, for me, an expat is just someone who doesn't live in the country that they were born in. That's it for me. But sometimes people don't understand that the same way, so it's really I like to say global soul. That's someone who just has that openness in their minds, and the question of should I stay or should I go is the biggest one of them all, I guess. So that'll be interesting to see what people are saying. And are you doing that in like an interview form, like your other series? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I would love to do a podcast, but honestly I don't have the time to kind of get into that medium of doing things. So I'm gonna stick to my strengths, which is words on paper or on internet, and then take it from there.
Sounds good. Well, I can't wait to read more interviews and more of your website. Thank you so much, Katherine, for spending some time with me today.
Thank you, Stephanie. We really covered a lot of ground, and
I think so too. But there's always so much to talk about, and so many more questions and things. But anyway, people can find you online, so that's great. And I'll definitely stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was my long overdue conversation with Katherine. I loved talking to her. I always appreciate a good in-depth conversation with someone who who has an interesting background and has really thought about their life and what it means to be an expat. Anyway, that's it from me for today. I am off to the beer garden. We might have had deepest winter 2 days ago, but this is Austin. And today it's summer with a balmy 23 degrees Celsius. That's 74 Fahrenheit. Well, Austin has a reputation for being weird, and the weather certainly is. Take care and see you next time.